Rich, we've known each other for 20 years. We've worked together for 10 years. Two things that strike me. You've always been interested in how people work, but you've also been interested in the place, in particular places, London places, but right in the middle of town, but also slightly edgy and slightly gritty. So tell us about this site. What made it stand out for you?
Yeah, I think that's right, actually. The beauty about Brockton Everlast is, as you know, it's in the name, and we now have the luxury of being able to invest in long-term commercial projects where we can invest and then we can develop to invest, but always long-term ownership. And that gives you the opportunity to really take ownership of the kind of reasons that you want to buy real estate, invest in real estate in London. And from our perspective, as you know, we're kind of fundamental property guys who love London and are massive believers in London. And London constantly changes, constantly evolves, and maintains its competitive advantage around the globe. And understanding those trends and understanding what makes London work is really exciting. And understanding the richness of London's fabric and the history is crucial. And really, for us, when we think about a place, we think about, in London, we think about, I guess, a whole bunch of ingredients. If I was trying to distill it down simply, I'd say connectivity, commerce, because it's commercial-led, the kind of investments we're looking for. It's culture. And then you get much more micro, and you think about community, and you think about context. And that allows us, when you sort of have that broad top-down and then micro approach, it really allows you to drill into the streets and the places and really understand the neighborhoods. So when we looked at, when this opportunity came to us, what excited us were all those factors, because if you take those one by one, if you look at the connectivity, well, the Crossrail story is well told and super exciting for London. An amazing investment project, amazing piece of infrastructure. It's a bit late and it's over budget. For what's new.
Long term.
But we're long term, and and actually, in terms of the timing of our investment into this particular project, hopefully we will time align with Crossrail, and I think that's fantastic because that will give huge amounts of improved connectivity to the place. And London and the City of London is from a macro perspective, as it evolves and maintains its global advantage, is already adapting. It's already embracing technology. It's already embracing life science. It's already embracing the creatives. It's already embracing the green economy. And as a consequence, that sort of dependence historically that it may have had in more recent decades on financial services is so much broader now. And if you've got connectivity as well and the ability for people to commute easily in and out, and you've got an exciting and vibrant place to live, play and work, then suddenly you've got all the components that make for a vital workplace. So connectivity kind of is our number one theme. And if the connectivity is there, we start to hone in on an opportunity. And then commerce is because fundamentally the way we're geared up is we're looking for commercial-led investments long term, and we're looking to stabilize whatever we own into a resilient and robust long-term investment. And commerce for us is in the exchanges on the street, it's in the exchanges in a shop, right through to the businesses that may actually occupy the spaces. And clearly the city has always and maintains a phenomenal and vital commercial sort of centre and vibe. And then you think about culture, and you can't ignore it because, and all of this, the theme that runs through all of this is people, but culture is so exciting. And the city's afforded with some of the great culture. You can talk about the sort of institutions, that's the easy bit. You can talk about the Barbican, you can talk about Guildhall, you can talk about a Museum of London, libraries, parks. But actually the real culture, and I know you share this, the real culture is in the streets. You're 100 yards away from streets that have got 400 years of memories, buildings that have got 400 years of real memories, of changing histories, of people. And that, I know it sounds all a bit poetic, but if you walk around those streets, and if you're fundamentally a Londoner, which I am, you kind of sense it. and you sense that energy. And the relationship, the sort of cheek to jowl relationship of that kind of history and context and culture, and the community that sort of has been over time has been sort of imbued in that, with the commerce, market stalls to market traders and everything in between, creates such a rich, in the broadest possible definition, and diverse atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, there's been markets on the site historically, and then there were silver markets.
Correct.
There's Petticoat Lane, and the thing also is interesting about, it's not core city, and it's more interesting for that, isn't it? People live there. It's, people who go to the city. I mean, I know it's changed, but they think of it as a daytime operation and silent nights. Well, obviously the culture of the nightlife in the city's changed, but also there's a whole community of people who live right next to the development, which gives it a completely different character, doesn't it? It connects it back to London.
Does. And that comes back to, this is why you and I work so well together, because that comes back to people. It's all about people.
Yeah.
The buildings are just hosting people. And finding the location here, you're right to talk about how it may have traditionally been perceived. I mean, actually, only 10 or 15 years ago, Houndsditch would have been seen as a secondary financial service location. But actually, the city is so much more than that. In the last 10 years, it's become so much more than that. It's become so much more diverse in the type of businesses, the type of people that it attracts. And as a consequence, you've also got what's been so powerful is the strength and the quality of communities that are coming through in East London proper, which is your adjacency. As you move into Spitalfields or further north into Shoreditch, and it's exciting. It's exciting, and to find a building that sort of mediates between all of these kind of socio-economic strands, but if it can mediate in a way that it actually engages and embraces, doesn't turn its back on any one of these things, that's a really exciting opportunity for Brockton Everlast.
And I suppose the other thing is, that interest in that place and that context and people is actually, by rethinking the ground floor, one can actually just transform not only the experience of those who walk through the streets, but also transform the connectivity and kind of break down the sort of barriers around the city that kind of stop the flow of people and ideas in a way. Then, Cutler Street can really, Cutler Street West can do that in a big way, I think.
Yeah, you taught me that seriously, maybe 15, 20 years ago. A couple of projects that you worked on that you were explaining to me, and actually you helped me realize that most people do walk around looking up, but they never look up beyond about 8 meters. So really it's the ground plane is crucial, what they feel under their feet, what they see in their immediate sight line, how they interact, the width of pavements, the lighting, the safety, all the old adages of sort of, I suppose, Jane Jacobs and other great advocates of eyes on the street and creating generous pavements, and the importance of rich public realm. And you kind of explained to me, and once I understood that, it became my way of thinking, that streetscape, that ground plane is crucial. And then that is because it's all about people. And then you take that further, and the buildings also have to respond. And as you quite rightly say, this is an amazing opportunity. And I've spoken about it on this particular project earlier in the process. This is a great opportunity to do something really transformative, which is in step with the City of Corporation's ambitions. They're already investing in calming the streets, in changing the pedestrian flows, in making them safer, in making them brighter, in making the sidewalks bigger, wider, landscaping, urban landscaping, greening, better microclimates. And that adds such a quality, because people want to walk through these streets. They want to walk safely. They want to enjoy it. One of the great things about London, and we both do it all the time because we tend to walk around London all the time. We tend to walk to all of our appointments. We choose a different route every time. We like to go down side streets. We like to find the lanes of London.
And you connect back to history.
And you connect back to history.
You see the plaque, the theme, the memory, the event, something that happened. I think the interesting thing you talk about Crossrail, it's a site for people movements. We can manage and reduce vehicle movement, much improve it, and the city's consolidated servicing strategies will help with that. And we can make better connectivity. We can also, though, transform, I think, the experience of arriving in the building, because that idea about, actually, we've talked about a multi-level public room. We've talked about cycling as a same entrance as the pedestrian entrance, and that actually maybe the first and second floor of this flex space, so that, there's smaller businesses and different kinds of work going on. And the idea of office lobby really doesn't, I think, exist in our lexicon of terms to describe space. I mean, I think Brockton Everlast is very much about that the ground floor is the room that receives, that engages with all the visitors, the street life.
Yeah.
It all becomes part of London's bigger market and connectivity ideas.
Yeah, and again, this is why it was so seamless working with you on this project, because with the time we spend thinking about the workplace and thinking about what a 21st century office building is meant to do, a lot of that's been informed by the work we've been doing over the last decade in building a co-working business under Brockton known as Fora. And Fora has to think about these things at the most micro level. So when Fora thinks about taking a building or owning a building in one of London's neighbourhoods, because again it's a London-based business, it's always about people, completely people-centric, because they call them their residents, which I think is a lovely term, because it breaks down those traditional landlord and tenant kind of us and them. It breaks all of that down, and the residents, and the reason I also like residents is it kind of has that domestic feel. And they want to make that the space in which the resident comes to even better than being at home. And there's something wonderful about that. And there's something, I mean, the light's been shone on this through COVID, but that aside, because this revolution in the workplace, you and I have been talking about for the last 10 years, maybe there's a light shining on it at the moment, but there's nothing new in my mind, and I know in your mind, about the need to radically change the workplace. And I think Fora really understood that early. We understood it, and you understand it. And when I'm wearing my Fora hat, if you like, and when Brockton were thinking about Fora spaces, we think about the last mile, because everyone will come into work a different way, but that last mile is crucial. How are they going to enjoy that last mile? And then when we think about whether they're cycling, whether they're using an electric bike, whether they've got a bicycle partnership, whether they're coming in on foot, we then try and make sure we facilitate that. So when they're coming into the building, the provisions are there to make it as seamless as possible. Changing provisions, the way they move through the space, the sequencing. And then that arrival is crucial. And you quite rightly talked about it just now, that sort of public-private realm. It's about invisible thresholds. It's about moving through space as seamlessly as possible, not having access controls and not having fobs. And, technology can deal with that in a much more intelligent way. But if you can create a much better social atmosphere by having those seamless thresholds, invisible thresholds, then it creates a much more, a much nicer place to walk into.
I think that's right, because you talk about diversity of talent, of businesses. The City of London's obviously always had a diverse culture of people and waves of immigrants passing through the city, and now living around the city. I think there's also an idea about creative businesses that sort of suggest a particular niche. Any modern business that's successful in the city needs to be creative in the way it thinks and developing and changing. And the office needs to support that creativity. And for most of us, home is a place you want to go back to and escape from, depending on your family life. And that travel is the journey in between to decompress or prepare for work. But actually, work, what it offers, we've talked about the greening of the city, the volume and generosity of the workspace. It's not a series of desks now, it's a whole range of different working kind of settings. But then we've also talked about, I think low carbon design embodied and operational is science. But what about greenery and biophilia? I think that's become really important to that idea of the creative home.
I think that's right. I think, we can't have this kind of conversation without owning a position on sustainability. I mean, it's I'd say when we talk about the brief that we both set our respective businesses to on this particular project, that's the overarching element, and everything touches it and everything flows from it. So you have to have a truly sustainable approach to the way you think about everything, from the materials you choose to the actual environmental strategy. And trying to create as low a carbon building as possible, both in terms of the embodied carbon and the operational carbon. And then you've got to go on an educational process with the supply chain, with the designers, and ultimately with your resident company, if that's hopefully what they're called, to make sure they use the building in the way in which you imagined and enabled, so that it is a truly sustainable building. But you're right, I mean, that's important, that's crucial. But what's a huge component to that, which I think is something that hopefully this particular project will excel on, is really bringing to the forefront the importance of outside space and of green space, and creating that sort of biophilia, that moment where you can have terraces, gardens, even potted plants, which is the domain of of every great Englishman or English person, as they is the sort of the quality of the garden. But if we can bring gardens all the way through the experience of the building, from street level up the building into rooms and onto roof terraces and onto roof gardens, it creates something that is really very tactile and has phenomenal qualities that all talk back to wellness, health, and ultimately productivity. The workplace has to be somewhere people want to come to. They really feel that it's an experience they want to have, however many numbers of days a week it's going to be, depending on their work pattern and work tasks. And I think that biophilia, or greening, is just such a crucial component to the overall sustainability strategy. So you're right.
I mean, London's a city of parks, but the city is more a city of churchyards, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that.
Tiny green pockets. So I think what we can do on the street, on Houndsditch, on Cutler Street, west and north, is actually bring trees in, bring planting, yet also give those hard urban places that London also likes, the place to perch, the place to sit, the place to buy a coffee, the place to just do your everyday business, not just if you're of the building, but as you walk past. I think that's really important, that the building offers lots to its residents, but also those residents pour out and engage with the city. So it's not a hermetically sealed place. The magic of coming to the City of London is leaving your office. Yes, you might go to a balcony. Yes, you might go to a roof garden, but also you might go out at lunchtime and just walk through the markets and leave, clear your brain, and then come back to that creative place and think slightly differently because you've seen something differently or had an chance encounter with someone. And I think that's the thing that gives the city its unique strength in a way, is that kind of the rich mix of people and incidents and ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that our piece of architecture is inclusive in both ways. Yeah, as you say, I mean, I think, people talk about, inclusive design, inclusive architecture, but it works both ways. And I think that it's so important that you don't design a fortress, that you design a building that people really enjoy, and it does all the things it's meant to do, and it has the sequencing we've just talked to, and it has all of the great, it's enabled in all the ways we've just alluded to. But people also want to spill out into the streets, and they want to enjoy the community, the neighborhoods, and get that sort of that energy that we were just talking about, 400 years of energy in the streets that surround you. I mean, you should be soaking that up and bringing that back. And every business needs to be creative in order to be productive. And what better place than the streets of the City of London? So I'm totally with you. And one of the things I love about where you've gone at the moment with the design is the building has all those component parts on the building journey. It has an exciting ground plane. It has a fantastic intermittent room that you can enjoy, pause, breathe, mix, meet, dwell, and then it has gardens everywhere, and I think that's wonderful. And those become amenities for both the residents of the building, but visual amenities as well for the immediate neighbourhood, so that there's sight lines that are joyful. The gut and the
I think
stars
that's right.
playful.
I mean, much as one like it, a lot of people will never go into the building.
That's right.
But they will walk past it. They will see the greenery. It becomes like walking through a London square,
right,
where you enjoy the trees, even though you haven't got the keys to the gate.
Right.
I mean, the building will be more open than that, but there's a lovely idea that actually the building is literally a series of hanging gardens. The skyline is celebrated and crowned by a green crown in a way, and this will have trees growing at every level. You can break out on every level. The building really does. It has an order, it has an elegance, it has a rhythm, it has bays, it has materials that reference the history of the city. But then it brings this new layer that, what the city quite rightly calls the urban greening factor, which is a very precise measure. But here it becomes a poetic idea
Yeah.
as well as meeting that scientific measure.
It does all those things, which is right. But to make it truly inclusive, it has to engage still on the ground floor, because you can't just say it's a visual amenity, because that in its own way just doesn't go far enough. We both want as much engagement as we possibly can out of the building. And what you're proposing on the ground floor now and the ground plane, by stepping the building back, creating this generous pavement, this wonderful public realm that frames the three active facades, by creating animation and transparency on those facades, and creating the first floors that you can see in the elevated space are flexible workspaces, which will hopefully really help the building have its energy, but also connects back to the street. I think that level of articulation, setback, and openness, and then being able to create beautiful landscaping in this generous realm that's being created, means that the building suddenly has a relationship, a proper relationship with the streets and the community. And I think that's really exciting. And if we can go as far as we possibly can and properly green it and create gardens and create trees and create the type of retail that works for everybody, and I think everyone's trying to work out what that is, and we're on that journey. And that's exciting, because that's part of London changing. I think that the days of sort of having a formula are long gone. It's all about what is absolutely right for that neighborhood, that micro location, that street, that corner, that building, those residents, that community, and then making it, and then trying to curate the space, and possibly making the space changeable and adaptable over much shorter periods of time. That's exciting from our perspective, and I know that's very much where you are. So activating that ground floor, generating this really generous space, greening it in a really long-term, future-proof, robust way, I think that's a real change that the community will enjoy, and it will connect them to the building in the right way and connect the residents of the building to the community in the right way.
Yeah, it's connecting pieces of the city that are less easily traversed, but it's also, the building, I think, is connecting the city into its future.
Yes.
Which is a much more variegated, finer grained idea of different kinds of businesses coming to the city because of the rich diversity of people and talent that's there. And then when they get there, they're finding a whole new idea of building that's not just kind of smarter, clever, and more enjoyable, but it's greener, it's more delightful, and it's much more engaged. I think that's really the most exciting idea of the project, that it comes engaged with London now and London's future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's the vision.
We talk about change. It's a time of change, and retail in particular. Everyone talks about the decline of the high street. What do we do with retail? The ground floors will be a magical place with places to sit, places to perch, greenery, places to walk through, to see more sky. The corners will open up as we've peeled the building away. I think the retail really is an idea of serving the street and the building, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a connector. We don't want to cut off that hall behind, almost like the market space, the entry to the building. But I think those things are little important activators. And in a way, it's such a dynamic world retail that we don't really know quite what's going to go in there. But whatever's going in there now may have evolved in 5, 10, 15 years. But if we get the little place outside right, then I think there'll always be activated little bits of kind of connection at street level, a little bit of life. Let's buy a coffee, get your shoe repaired, reading a paper if we go back to a papered world, or whatever it might be. I think that's kind of an interesting thing about change over time. We can make the street right, and that particular thing, I think, consultation, the community of users, all of those things can feed into that, not just now, but into the future, can't they?
I totally share that. I think there's time to change, and I think this building, the building that stands there at the moment, was a building of its time in the 80s. I remember it going up, and what we're proposing is a building of our time, of this time, and I think that as far as the retail is concerned, retail is absolutely at the sort of the precipice of change, and it's really difficult, truly difficult to know what high street, local retail, urban retail needs to be. it absolutely is, in my opinion, is a significantly important part of what makes streets and what makes London great. So I think that the idea that there shouldn't be retail is a devastating concept for me. So animating this building in the right way is crucial. Eyes on the street comes back to Jane Jacobs, and people and animation. And I think when we think about often at Brockton, we break down property to hardware and software kind of language, and the hardware is the physical building and the software are the people. And I think, as you've just said about the retail, I think that the way you're designing the retail and the transparency, the scale, the volume, the connectivity is just good solid hardware, which sets up a really resilient structure for the story to be told. And I think for us to presuppose we understand what that retail needs to be at the precipice of change, we'll just get it wrong. And I think what's really important is to stay current, to keep listening, to talk, to engage, and to make sure that that retail is a positive response to what we're hearing. And I suspect that it will be, whatever it is, it will be changeable. And that's like the markets.
I mean, the market, London's, the city's a market. There have been silver markets, food markets, clothes markets. And in a sense, the constant is the market.
Yes.
And the experience. And I think despite all the things that that come along, market will still be something because it's actually a pleasant experience. It engages the brain and the eyes in a way that online doesn't. And I think in a way that's what we're going to make sure with the retail. It's engaging the mind, the eyes and the spirit.
As you say, the essence of everything. If you say the essence is people are social beings, you're talking about a social activity. The market is the essence of that, and that energy, the energy that's in those streets that we talked to at the beginning of this conversation over the last 400 years, the energy that's imbued through the streets of London, you want to maintain that energy. You've just got to create the right architectural composition to make sure that you make it as sociable and dynamic as possible. And I think that the retail is a really exciting chapter, and it will complete how we animate and activate the three important and significant facades of this project.
And we've talked about the future a lot. When you think about if this project is connecting the city to its new future, which is an ever-evolving piece, I suppose the really interesting thing is, you remember that building going up. We can't make buildings that the next generation will be pulling down.
That's true.
And remembering that they've gone up. This building, we talked about embodied carbon, we talked about operational carbon, but really this building is an everlast building.
Yes.
And that's really, I think, a really exciting moment in history now. There's been a tipping point. Only maybe the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years has it finally come through to everyone's thinking that actually a really good building is there to be adapted in the ways we can't imagine by future generations, but it's there. That's why it's got to be, long life, loose fit, low energy, characterful, volume. It's got to connect with London's, future, and that's what I think is really exciting. It's a building that is forever.
And I think that's the ambition. The challenge is not only meeting that almost heroic ambition, which is I know what we've set ourselves, and that's both a privilege and a challenge. But I think what I don't want to lose sight of and maintain the tension is you've got to do all those things and also create something that's quite beautiful, that really is delightful and that people enjoy as a visual experience, as a physical experience, as a sensory experience. Because I kind of think of ourselves when you're investing or developing to invest in London, you're kind of a steward because the built environment is hundreds of years old. And so if you're putting something in, and now more than ever, you're putting something in that's everlasting, as much as something can be within the built fabric, you've got a real responsibility to make sure that it's got real purpose, intent, integrity, and is delightful.
Yeah, that delightful thing is crucial because it will last forever because people enjoy it enough to want to keep it.
Correct.
Because it'll have challenges in the future that we don't yet know about. But if it's memorable, Leadenhall Market or whatever it might be, then it gets built into the communal psyche and people want to keep it.
Yeah.
Not just they have to because of carbon, they want to keep it.
What a great vision. And that would be a fantastic success for you and I.
Absolutely.